Here's a look at the numbers now. In 2014, more than 1,900 cats and dogs were euthanized at Detroit Animal Control. 339 animals were returned to their owner, and just 135 were sent to the Michigan Humane Society for adoption.
It's not a shelter, it's a euthanasia facility, and it's time for change for our animals.
Nita Moses says the dog known as Ace is her dog. She says his name is actually Doo-Doo, and he's 4 years old and was stolen several months ago.
It doesn't even have to get ugly. I just want my dog.
With old vet papers and a picture of her stolen dog as a puppy in hand, Nita Moses went to Animal Control early today to claim him. But she says the dog they showed her, the one on the left, is not Ace. And she fears the dog she says is hers on the right, the seemingly docile dog known as Ace, has already been put down before the deadline.
Give me my dog. Don't give me a dummy dog. I'm not taking anything home. That's not my dog.
Workers with Detroit Dog Rescue are trying to help Nita Moses.
I believe that this dog has already been put down. I believe he was probably put down the day he was brought in.
We're told staffers at Animal Control do not believe Nita Moses is really Ace's owner. Bruce King is over Animal Control for the city of Detroit, and while he says threatening calls have been made to his office over the fate of Ace, he says there is nothing anyone can do to save him.
After the 4 days has ended, then we have the right to euthanize that animal.
King says unless owners of pit bulls and pit bull mixes come forward to claim their dog within the 4-day holding period, they will be put down per department policy.
We need to maintain the policies that we have within the city. We're looking at to ensure the safety of our citizens.
Late today, an attorney for Detroit Dog Rescue went with Moses to Animal Control.
The easiest thing for them to do would be to let me look at the dog, observe the markings, determine if it is the same dog that has been shown on television. They're refusing to let me do that. I can only have the worst feelings about that.
They will now be seeking emergency intervention from a court.
A woman says her 2-year-old dog was a healthy pet when he was placed under quarantine earlier this month. She claims he was neglected by a local animal control group and died from a deadly illness in a matter of days. 7 Action News reporter Tara Edwards is looking into this from Southwest Detroit.
They promised me verbally that they would take good care of my dog.
But according to Veronica Stewart, the exact opposite happened. After being quarantined here at the Detroit Animal Rescue, 2-year-old Major was found in what animal advocacy groups call deplorable conditions. Confined to a cage with no space to stand, sitting in his urine and feces, a dry bowl with no water, and he somehow contracted parvovirus, a nasty illness that kills animals from the inside out.
We do believe that Major did suffer unnecessary neglect at the hands of Detroit Animal Control.
Major was first taken into DAC custody after he accidentally got loose and bit a neighborhood boy along Kentucky on Detroit's northwest side. Veronica was told Major would be quarantined for 12 days. Eventually, she says DAC released her dog to her, but then was told by DAC it was a mistake, and they were still investigating the case. Officers brought the pit mix back to the DAC shelter. Veronica says that's when her pet's health dramatically deteriorated.
I found Major. I found him laying in a pool of his own blood, and it had been there. It had been dried as well. So how long had he been sitting in his own bloody waste?
Veronica shot this cell phone video of her dog bleeding from the illness. According to Veronica, the vet at DAC was no help to Major. She found medical care for the dog somewhere else. Animal advocacy groups say several laws were broken while Major was under DAC's care.
Our property, that they like to call it, or our companions as we see it, needs to be housed and cared for adequately. If I can get a ticket for neglecting my dog, you should get a ticket for neglecting my dog.
Dog Aid tells 7 Action News they want to meet DAC about the treatment of animals there. But they say in the meantime, they are worried about the safety of the pets there.
New at 5:30, a local woman says it felt like the city of Detroit was holding her dog for ransom.
And she says because she couldn't come up with the money fast enough, it cost her beloved dog its life.
7 Action News reporter Kimberly Craig has a story of Caitlin and Cato.
He was just a great big ball of sunshine.
Caitlin Siberian Husky Cato was everything to her, and until today, she thought Detroit Animal Control transferred Cato to a shelter to be adopted out because she couldn't pay their fees soon enough. But today, the city of Detroit telling Action News that Cato was euthanized. They say Caitlin had 5 weeks to pay what she owed, and she didn't.
I was pretty much begging him, like, listen, I don't get paid for another 2 weeks. Like, I tried to borrow money, but it still wasn't enough.
Caitlin is coming forward with her story in hopes of seeing change at Detroit Animal Control. For over 2 months now, rescue groups have been pleading with the city of Detroit to let them in to help care for the dogs and cats and transfer out adoptable ones before they're euthanized. City officials say they're still working on getting a process in place and working on changing their cash-only policy, a policy that had Caitlin scrambling last October when Cato and her German Shepherd Piper accidentally got out of their fenced-in yard. Detroit Animal Control seized them and vaccinated them, but after a couple weeks, Caitlin could only get enough money together to get Piper out, and she says she desperately tried to save the rest of the money to get Cato too.
They just held my dogs for ransom.
And a week after she paid to get Piper out, she says she was told Cato was gone. She says he was only in animal control for 3 weeks.
And I called and they said, we transferred him, he's not here.
And transferring him where, did they say?
They said they couldn't disclose that information because he's pretty much part of their system now.
But city officials say they did not transfer Cato to anyone. They say they waited 5 weeks for Caitlin to get the cash for Cato, and then they euthanized him because they didn't consider him to be adoptable.
He was great around kids. He would let them pull on their ears and tug on them and throw them down, and he would play right back. He never even like played bit.
So for them to say he's unadoptable,
that makes me so angry I can't even, like, I'm shaking right now.
Caitlin is like a lot of people struggling financially, and she wishes the city of Detroit would allow dogs to be returned to their owners and billed instead of killing a dog that is more like family. She says she loved Cato and just needed some help.
And I couldn't see why they couldn't like release him to me if they couldn't hold him and then send me some bills like from the city. Like, that's something you can't ignore. At least I would have my dog, he'd still be alive, and they would get their money if that's all they want.
To this day, I feel bad because I had to pick which one I wanted, which dog that I want. Well, I had to pick.
Floyd Hardrick is talking about his 2 dogs, both seized by Detroit Animal Control in July when one of them was running loose near his house. But Floyd could only afford the fees to get his dog Rock out, and Rock died 4 days later.
He was coughing and mucus. He wanted to bark, but he couldn't. His bark sounded like every time you open his mouth, that's the only thing that came out.
The dog Floyd could not afford to have released was taken with her 1-week-old puppy. Floyd says he was told not to bother trying to get the puppy back because it wouldn't survive after being inside Detroit Animal Control. The mother was put down and the puppy died in its cage.
I was told that even if I do get her out, by the puppies being so young, that they would be sick.
When Action News cameras were finally allowed inside Detroit Animal Control for the first time, we saw these young puppies, but Detroit Animal Control refused to release them to a rescue for the remainder of their hold period, leaving many to wonder if they'll survive.
I just can't see him just dropping dead like that. There's no way.
Frederick Weems' 8-year-old Beagle mix named Scrappy was recently taken by Animal Control during an eviction when he was at work. He told Animal Control he would be able to afford to get him out this Friday, but on Monday they called him and told him Scrappy was dead, and they wouldn't tell him why.
It hurts. It hurts very much. He was my life.
I'll tell you what, this lawsuit alleging animal neglect and animal cruelty, but there is some good news in all this, and that is that some of these animals inside the Detroit Animal Control will be allowed to go to other shelters, maybe even prolonging their life. Let's get you to this lawsuit now, and talking about this lawsuit filed by a former employee. We've also learned that when our cameras went inside there, we got to see conditions for ourselves. We saw these young puppies. Animal Control refusing to release these puppies to a rescue group for the remainder of their hold period, leaving many to wonder this morning if they'll even survive their stay. One man who had his 8-year-old Beagle mix taken by Animal Control during an eviction while he was at work called him and told him that he'd be able to pick the dog up on Friday, but on Monday he got a call saying his dog was dead.
I just can't see him just dropping dead like that. There's no way.
It's a black eye for the city. You can be sure that people who have dogs are going to think twice before they decide to move into Detroit once they're seeing these reports. It's terrifying.
Beyond a black eye for the city, I'll tell you what.
Rescue groups.
Well, there's one dog that Director Harry Ward calls his own and will never allow to leave the aging controversial facility. And Detroiters who have to pay boarding fines to get their dogs back before they're killing are footing the bill.
Kimberly Craig has details and the state's reaction to the disgusting way some dogs are fed.
Food is put on either a piece of paper or a paper food tray.
Harry Ward under fire for some of the images taken inside Detroit Animal Control just yesterday. Images of these very young puppies that are too young to be vaccinated inside a facility where so many puppies never make it out alive. And then there are the images of food thrown directly onto the concrete where the dogs urinate and defecate.
Do we do ground feeding? That's a question with throwing the food on the ground. That's a question for the state.
So Action News called the state of Michigan's Department of Agriculture today because they're charged with inspecting Detroit Animal Control. They say ground feeding is not against the law, but not best practice. And they say they'll be following up with Detroit Animal Control. Then there is Peaches, a mastiff that has been living here at Detroit Animal Control for years. A source says this picture of Peaches was taken in 2011. Director Harry Ward has claimed her as his own as a sort of emotional support for him.
You have to be creative and find ways to basically bring yourself into it in a way that's not destructive of your feelings.
But hard to imagine anyone thinking a life here is appropriate when rescues have asked to adopt Peaches into a home. But Ward says he'll never let her leave.
In a cage for the rest of her life, if that's the way you wish to phrase it.
Does Peaches get vaccinated at taxpayer dollars?
I would say yes, she does, but I would pay for, when she gets a rabies vac, that I have to pay for. So I know next you're going to ask me for an invoice, right? I don't have one to give you today.
Harry Ward's critics say he does not operate with the best interests of animals.
You got to understand, he got rid of adoptions. It took 4 months, dozens of people, demonstrations, news reporters, and lawyers to get some dogs out of there. This isn't what he wanted. He wanted to continue his protocol of eliminate all these animals. Don't adopt them. Kill them.
Animal lovers forced to jump through hoops to help Detroit stray and abandoned dogs and cats.
7 Action News' Kimberly Craig has more on the strange legal document the city is requiring volunteers to sign.
Was that the city would only consider letting them in if they signed a confidentiality agreement to not discuss or videotape whatever they observed.
We were hoping we would be inside by now, and we have made several requests to, but as of now, we have not been allowed access.
All of the dogs are in there are sick. They were coughing up phlegm, white stuff. You know, my dog is a healthy dog. He was 92-pound pit bull terrier, and by the time I had to put him to sleep, he was 64 pounds.
I could only afford to get one dog out, and there was nothing I could do about my other dog that I love so much.
There was no hope for Meyer. Meyer had been beaten. Meyer had tendinitis. He had the kennel cough. He had E. coli poisoning. His trachea had been crushed.
They weren't being fed properly. They were throwing food on the floor with feces. There was no bowls. They were never let out of their cages to go to the bathroom. So they were stuck in there 24/7. Pretty much I'd watch them come in healthy, and within a week or two of them being there, they'd have some sort of mucus or cough or respiratory or diarrhea.
Thanks to members of the community in Detroit speaking out, the director at the shelter has been replaced, and it at least appears the shelter is changing its ways. However, there are other shelters across the country that still need stopped. And the way for that to happen is to speak out when you see it happening. If you have a corrupt shelter in your community, please speak out and make it known.